Well, I want to, first of all, to thank the Brodsky Center for the amazing opportunity to have a print done with an idea of mine. And I had a little bit of, I had no experience, but I experienced printmaking at the Bob Blackburn's printmaking workshop in New York. He is a legend in the printmaking world. And I realized that I was definitely not cut for printmaking. You have to be extremely careful and you know, my prints would always come with finger stains, and I definitely got a lot of respect for printmaking. At that time, they were, well, we all were working with engraving, intaglio, and rolls, different thickness of rolls. It was extremely difficult, and the work that Justine has done here has been very difficult for her to do, and very easy for me to see it becoming. So I'm really, really very appreciative of the work done. I know how taxing it is, and I have a complete admiration for your work and for the work of printmakers. Way to go. I work with clay mostly, so you know I don't mind stains. This print is titled Philadelphia Pachamama. And I just wanted to read a paragraph so that you understand the context of the work. And then Justine is gonna guide us to understand the process for which she went to do this, to make this possible. I am researching Peruvian pre-colonial religious entities with the purpose of granting them the power of omnipresence as a decolonial act, questioning Western translations of the other. The project acknowledges them, respectfully protecting and retaining memory, and takes the opportunity they offer for reinvention. I have the belief that designation, recognition of beauty around us takes place after we embrace our physical features and name them beautiful. Then we observe the world from a place of confidence. In a colonization process, the aesthetic appraisal of ourselves and the world we create is destabilized and eroded. In Peru, as in many places, skin is more beautiful if lighter. Because we don't see ourselves with our own eyes, we find our features ugly and our aesthetic creations lesser than those coming from European traditions. All Peruvian ceramics are in natural history museums, and contemporary Peruvian art creations, when not backed up by a university degree, are deemed popular arts of crafts. I'm looking for ways of not conforming to Western judgment, hoping to recover the ancestral gaze which can find me beautiful again, in spite of age. As a Westernized individual, I choose that gaze as my inheritance and point of departure. So I am trying all deities that were created by humans to be considered equal, and one of them is the cosmic mother or Mother Earth. The explanation of what Pachamama is goes beyond what I can tell you here. It's more than what I can understand. And, but I like the idea of acknowledging her presence here in Philadelphia, because she has to be everywhere, and she's here too. So this print is to me like a letter to Philadelphia Pachamama, thanking her for everything that she has given me, because Philadelphia has been generous to me and my family. I come from living in a squatter building in the South Bronx without heat for 6 years. And I got here, and my life changed completely. I met the best man in the world, and I have a career that has flourished thanks to the entities that protect us here. So I just wanted to explain a little bit of what it means. I will tell you a little bit more about the pigeon beings, but I want to pass it to Justine because I can keep talking.
I'll start out by introducing the process itself. So for a collaborative print shop like the Brodsky Center, an artist is invited to be in residence with a collaborative printer for a period of time. It's usually a minimum of 2 weeks. So Kukuli physically came and we started to workshop the print. We had Zoom meetings before the residency to get an idea of how to get the ground running. So the idea behind the structure and the imagery was somewhat established, and we ended up planning everything else based on how it's happened in the studio. So after Kukuli is with us for the amount of time that it takes to get what's called the approval to print, which is a print that represents what the edition should look like, which is the series of 10 prints that all look the same that are sold on the market. And there are also 6 proofs that are kept. The artist gets 2 proofs, I get approved, the Brodsky Center gets approved, PAFA gets approved. So the prints are then disseminated. Kukuli returns and signs the prints, and that's the end of the project. So for this print, which this is the final version of the print here, we knew that Kukuli knew that she wanted to work large scale as we could manage, which was really dictated by the plates, which are on the table here, and the kind of presses that we have. So we ended up making it a photo lithograph because the plates that we could order are the largest ones we could get. So that dictated the process. And I think the scale was really significant to Kukuli, and maybe you could speak to why you didn't want it to be smaller than this scale.
By the way, I'm keeping myself close to her, not because I like the spotlight, but I have a microphone and we are sharing it. When I came here, I was told I can do whatever I want, and that is really, really very enticing to let imagination go. And I like the idea of a print that had a presence on the wall, not that would get lost, but that cannot be ignored. And I think that the size was perfect. I feel like I had complete freedom to choose the presence of the piece. So even though, I don't know if I would have wanted it bigger at the end. I think that it has the perfect presence. And the other thing is I wanted it to be bleeding from the paper. When I worked with intaglio, it was always a window. And I like the idea of going off that window. And as I was talking, Paula and Justine were looking at me like, yeah, we can do that. But that was the admirable thing, that it could be done, and there were many steps, as Justine is going to let you know.
I'm going to get into how lithography physically works in a moment when we get to the plates. But basically, for photolithography, it involves making films or negatives like you would for making like a darkroom photograph. And those are what end up making the plate from which you print later in the process. In printmaking, you have to basically break each color into one plate. In most cases, you can't print multiple colors simultaneously, but some exceptions. So that means that we had to look at the colors we wanted to achieve and say, how many colors is it going to take stacked up to create the full spectrum? And in this case, there ended up being 7 colors to make the center area. So there's a yellow, there's a pale brown, there's a dark brown, there's a red. Oh, there's a white. Yes, that's the other one.
I was a pain.
So like the greens in the print are just created by yellow printed on top of blue. There's a difference in the reds because of white on top of some areas and yellows underneath other areas to create a warmer red. And then there are a lot of mark making areas so that you get the illusion of a new color, but when you go close, there is a drawn element. So there's a lot of interest going on within. There's also a large off-white flat, as in a solid color, printed behind the entire structure. So this is the film for making this flat color. This is a material called ruby lith, which is very light blocking, and you can cut the negative spaces out, and then this ends up blocking everything on the plate from the light, and then it prints as a solid color, basically. So we started separating out each color getting its own film, and Kukuli painted these with black acrylic washes, which is a very opaque material, so it can block the light properly. So this is the blue film. This is the red film. On and on. So most of the time in the studio, Kukuli was working on these elements, and we had a mock-up of the full spectrum underneath, so she could look and see there needs to be blue here and blue here and blue here, and slowly start to assemble the image, knowing that when it prints all together, it will give the desired effect. So there was definitely a lot of workshopping, tweaking the colors and how they stacked, changing the films and remaking the plates, just to get the desired effect. Here's the black layer.
So these are all hand-drawn?
These are all hand-drawn by Kukuli, yes. So red blocks UV light as well as black. So there are some opaque materials that you can draw with that are red. Weirdly enough, red works just as well as black, whereas yellow or blue don't block UV light as much. So these are the hand-drawn stems. And then there was the element of the platform, which kind of buttresses and creates the structure of the image. And I'm going to stand and show this. So these were taken from photographs of the Kensington elevated subway by Kukuli's house. And she gave me the digital file, and we spent a lot of time stretching them and editing them and flipping them so that it had the desired size and structures. There's also an element across the center that looks like a beaded textile, which is a lenape textile.
It's a lenape belt. You know, the legend says that Peng traded land and with the lenape, and the lenape gave him a couple of belts. This is a legend. It's not something that really happened, but it's more like a symbolic story. And one of them, which actually exists, one of them have this cross shape that has nothing to do with Christianity. And I found important to add a lenape element in the structure, because that is the land in where we are. And the train bridge, is it a bridge? The elevated platform is where I waited for my daughter for a few years when she would come in the school bus. So for me, it had a meaning, you know, like your family, your child, your husband, it becomes what the city is, and you love the city as you love the memories that the city is allowing you to have with the family that you formed. So for me to have the images of that particular place where I would stand up every day waiting for my little one was an important element of what Philadelphia is to me.
The textile also was taken from a photograph that Kukuli had taken at an exhibition. So.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah.
And so we printed these after editing the photographs. We print them from the digital printer we have here in the shop that makes film positives. And they needed to be printed in sections because of the size difference. So I would print sections and then create like a puzzle piece element where it would fit, and then kind of carefully cut them in, and then I mounted that onto a larger film that was then used to make the plate. And then, can you push me those two show pieces of the film? So then, as we were going along, Kukuli started thinking of having an element of the presence of water in with the print. So we started experimenting with overlaying washes on the computer and seeing how they would interact with the image. And at first, I think this was more just to get a feel for the material. This is one of the first platform washes. Yeah. So this material is actually Xerox toner powder from old Xerox printers, and it can be mixed with an acrylic medium and a little bit of a photo flow, which reduces the surface tension. And it's like a powder reticulating wash that you can paint on films. And it does a lot more than what the black acrylic or ink will do. It has a lot of interesting textures because of the fact that it's a powder suspended in a liquid.
To me, I went once with my mother and my sister in those those half boat, half cars that there used to be a few years ago. The duck boat. And we went down to the river, to the Delaware, and it was very sad to see such a probably extraordinary, beautiful river many years ago, so dirty, so muddy, so dirty, so abandoned, so overused. And it's funny, now we always do that with everything we touch. We are Midas of destruction. So these kind of textures kind of remember that crystalline water, not crystalline anymore.
So after doing this test, Kukuli made another wash, laying this over the mock-up of the center area. So she kind of manipulated how the wash was going to interact with the Pachamama center area. She used sponge to apply much of this. So this is what ended up being used to create the final wash plate that's printed in the background.
It's funny how we artists always try to make it look random, but very controlled, you know?
Very true. And then
we are the worst.
It seemed she wanted to have the wash also in the silhouettes of the pigeon figures. So she made another wash and then kind of placed the outlines behind the sections that seemed to be interacting with the figures in interesting ways. And then I cut those out according to the drawings and then adhered them to this film so that the washes would all be on the same plate. And this area is really fun. It was probably halfway through the residency, and Kukuli started thinking about these pigeon figures and made beautiful drawings.
Well, you know, I live in Kensington, and I guess that's enough for explaining, but I will over-explain anyway. I live in Kensington, and unfortunately, we are witness of the suffering of many on the streets of Kensington Avenue, which is still there every day. And I found important in a way to not to edit people from this piece and not to edit people from the reality of what Philadelphia is suffering. And I was looking for a way to introduce them with respect, with anonymity. It was a hard decision because I could have not used any metaphor, but I didn't want to ignore either. I feel like this is part of the reality of Kensington, my neighborhood, and of Philadelphia as a whole. So we have a lot of pigeons in Kensington too, and all over Philadelphia, and they are also invisible to us. And I say also because unfortunately, all these people are invisible to the society as a whole. And I borrowed the innocence and the innocence of a little animal that is so familiar to us, and that survives one way or another among us. I don't know how the pigeons do, because when people want to feed them, they give them bread, and bread is not the best thing for them anyways. But they survive because the power of life is always present, is always beating. And so I hope I haven't been disrespectful. I just wanted the population to be present. And that's why I came up with this metaphor of the people, the pigeon people.
And so figuring that out and how to incorporate it into the print started with Kukuli making sketches in a notebook and creating lots of different iterations. And then she made these tracings, and we would tape them onto the print that we had so far and step back and say, what is the arrangement? And eventually narrowed it down to these figures. These are placed on the bottom, and then there is, this one is placed
up in the
top corner. So it was really fun to watch Kukuli make these drawings. It was very fun.
There are certain elements that struck me. One of them is the sense of community that even exists in people who are invisible for society. Mm-hmm. And if you go, as we do every day through Kensington, you see this group of people who are sharing everything, including the needles, but not only the needles, and are making fire and for everyone, and the sense of community and the existence of humanness is still perceived, even in those moments of tragedy. Mm-hmm. So that's why you have those that are around the fire, mm-hmm. because that's something that is that desire of living, mm-hmm. you know, the survival. And the one that is by itself is not by itself. They are not by itself in reality because people are always interacting with each other. But at the end, they are alone. It's a contradictory.
Paradox?
Yes, it's a paradox.
The basis of a printing press is that you have ink on a substrate, which can be a piece of wood, a piece of metal, a piece of stones, and it has ink on it that contains the image, and it runs through the press with paper on top, and the press applies the pressure that's necessary to transfer the ink and substrate to the paper. And that's what the press is for. And it's also made in a way that's replicable. So the plate itself, the substrate, can yield as many prints as is necessary so that you can create an edition. And most printmaking techniques have, it can be carving down like a woodcut, and sizing lines into metal like an etching, or a screen print which involves a stencil. So they're all physical, planar differences. They have topography. But lithography is what's called a planographic medium, meaning that it's all flat on the surface and there's no topography to the substrate itself. And it's maintained by having an image area that is basically grease receptive. It's chemically made to attract oil. And the negative space is chemically made to attract water and be grease repellent. So the printing itself is just based on the fact that oil and water do not mix. Traditionally, it started by using limestone, and you could draw on limestones with grease-based materials, and they would create a deposit in the stone, and chemically then you would have two opposing elements of calcium carbonate that were hydrophobic and hydrophilic, and eventually, anyway. But stones are very cumbersome, so eventually the technology of aluminum plates that printed lithographically came around. So there is what's called a ball grain plate, which are thin sheets of aluminum, just like these. These are thin sheets of aluminum. But a ball grain plate is textured on the surface to emulate the surface of a stone. So it's almost like a drawing paper texture, and you still draw on it with crayons and washes and pencils that are all grease-based. But then we have the photolithograph, which is you create the image on a film, and then there is a light-sensitive coating on the aluminum plate, which is what this green material is. The plate comes to you completely covered in the green material, and then you take it into a dark room with an exposure unit, and you use that to develop a plate, the same way that you would develop a photograph, where the drawing that's on the negative creates a block, and everything else is basically removed from the plate through the exposure, and you end up with this photographically created image that is chemically grease receptive, so it prints in the same way as lithographs. So in the act of printing, we have oil-based ink on rollers, which are actually on the table over there, some examples of rollers. And you roll the ink out onto the plate while keeping it wet with a sponge. So you physically sponge the plate, and then you roll the ink over the surface, and the ink sticks to the plate, the water repels it from the negative image area, and you run it through the press. That's the basic process. So there are 10 plates here. It's an 11-color print because there are some hand-stamped elements. But basically, we have the black plate, the wash plate, the flat, in the background. We have the platform structures, and then each of these are the color elements to the text area in the center. Brownie, sienna, red, yellow, white, blue, and black. I printed them. You print them in an order so that the colors mesh well enough. You normally print from light to dark, so your dark colors don't taint your light colors. So it takes a long time to make one print. These are the proofing sheets that I would make to keep track of the print and the color order I was using, and I keep notes on what kind of rollers and the additives that I put in the ink, my sponging patterns, how much ink it takes to pull one print, just as a record. So this has the order of the colors that I ended up using for the edition. And I just wanted to have these rollers here as an example of the kinds of tools that I use. And you pick a roller that its size is compatible with the size of the image that you're printing. So the smaller ones are for the text areas where I can roll in sections, but the largest ones are so I can roll out a whole plane of ink across the entire plate at once. So different plates require different kinds of rollers. And then the other element over here is the color mixing process, which is really important. And I would mix my colors with Kukuli in the room and mix it and take it to her and tweak it and continue. So as I'm mixing reds and yellows and blues, I'm creating like a bright yellow, and then we're making it colder, or you're taking a red and you're making it more or less intense. You're dealing with the transparency of the ink, which is a major factor, until you arrive at the finished color. And then I will keep a record of this color with what is called a drawdown, and I'll keep a sample of the color inside this foil package. And when I go to print the edition, I pull this out, I mix and I match to it, so it's exactly the same color. kind. So these are just some examples of the color swatches that came up along the way until we finalized to the final tint of colors. And along the way, we played with printing different elements in different colors. So this is an earlier proof where we printed the platform in a darker black, and the wash was not printed in the teal that it is. This is an earlier stage of the colors. And so we would print a lot of different versions of these and look at them and say which one is more successful until we arrive at the final combination. So another example of the grains. And sometimes it involves cutting things out and sticking them up on other prints, or using colored pencils to sketch in and say, would this be more successful here? And trying to find the most efficient way to arrive at the final proof.
The text is inspired in Wari design. Wari is one of the many cultures that existed in Peru, in the territory that we know as Peru. And Wari is probably old, like around 2,000 years old. And the designs probably have a meaning, but it's lost. And I just wanted to bring that kind of aesthetic to the work without copying what it's being said, because I don't know what it's saying, and that's where it comes from. It's reminiscent of a Wari design in a textile. And I have used that before in this series. We just were looking for some kind of movement within the writing, something that will give it a kind of an ethereal feeling, not solid segments, but something that could have air going through in a way. And I think that it was a matter of composing that kind of texture so that there's air going around, because as you can see, there's weight here, right? And if we had chosen the one that was black only, the weight would have been in the whole thing, the whole structure, and I wanted this to come forward, the words being said, Philadelphia Pachamama, and everything to be the context of the greeting. So the blue and the lighter gray gave it that, at least it seems to me, gave it a sense of this is the main element, not only because it's in the center, but because it's talking, and the rest is the structure that supports it.
I think too, I mean, at least for me, this has an element of like a sepia photograph to a degree. It has like a faded texture, which makes it feel historical in some ways.
Yeah, I see. That one too.
And like something to keep in mind when making a print is to say, what is this medium good at achieving, like texture-wise, drawing-wise, and then try and take advantage of that in the print. So if these are all solid colors, there's no reason why it can't be a screen print, printing solid blocks of color. But with lithography, you have very thin, transparent colors, and you have more capacity for texture. So it seemed like this was an opportunity to try and make it actually look like a lithograph with these wash elements and with the drawn elements in the center, which I think is important for if you're going to print in a medium, it should look like that medium, and it should represent what that medium can do.
Yes. And I don't know if you can read it, but this is a P-H-I-L-A-D-E-L. What is P-H-I-A, Philadelphia, and then P-A-C-H-A-M-A-M, Pachamama. And then Pachamama comes here, and Philadelphia goes there. My background is as a painter. I was a painter for many years, but when I was a kid, I had solo exhibitions since I was 10, yearly until I turned 23, and I left Peru. But during all those years, I had exhibitions, and I was doing only bidimensional work. So I approach ceramics, I approach sculpture from a painterly point of view. I've been told. Having said that, painting and ceramics give me two different possibilities. And the things I talk about in ceramics are not the same than what I talk about in painting. Like in painting, it's more a feminist view, and a ceramic allows me to talk about social justice and what colonization is and so on, and it's the exploration of other aesthetics that is not Western aesthetics. So this is the first time that a piece is bidimensional with an issue that I deal usually three-dimensionally. And I have borrowed elements like the wari textile, that is something that I use in my ceramic as a painterly element of the piece, Huaca del Agua. And so I feel like they have been borrowing from each other in this occasion. In painting, I have never done that before. So that's something new for me. I had no idea of all the possibilities, and Justine introduced me to those possibilities. And then I ran with them and made her life difficult. But definitely, this is, like, for instance, the platforms is something that I have always thought, how can I incorporate in my three-dimensional work, but I can't. My work is much more emotional and visceral almost. But this technique allowed the possibility. So when she told me we can use photographs, and I was like, and we can cut it and make like cutouts, and she was like, yes. I was like, ah, and then we can do this, that, and then I you know, I made it more difficult, but it's a, you know, it's a labor of love. It's definitely a labor of love.
I would say too, like depending on the complexity of the image, if it's a simpler image, smaller, fewer colors, then you probably have more time and a greater ability to try lots of different versions of it. So something this complex, it does kind of make it more difficult to make a lot of changes, and that translated for us into time. And at a certain point, I think you come up against a wall where you're like, this is the closest we're going to get, and it still ends up being a great piece, but you're never going to make exactly what you're going for, I think, and the medium is going to dictate where you end up to a degree, but that can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, and that's a good thing, because you are a different person. A year later, I might have thought about something different, and this is the representation of where we were at that moment and what were the possibilities that medium provided. So I think that everything that you do is that moment, and I'm very happy that our moment took us to this. This is part of a series that is titled De las Huacas y las Pachamamas, and the work that I'm doing is three-dimensional. And yes, and it's part of this idea of summoning the omnipresence. Can I say that? I said it so well when I read it. But It's about acknowledging the presence of entities of any religion, but particularly the Andean religion in my work, but assuming that all entities created by humans to explain the world should be understood that exist or have the right to exist everywhere. So there's within the Andean religion, there's the Huacas, the Malquis, the Apus, and I'm looking for them here because I live in Philadelphia. So for example, I found out that the area where I live used to be the lands of a man called Norris. His last name was Norris, and he had a lot of land. And they came and they just said, oh, this is mine, and that is yours. And, but that land was before known as Cacamensi. And who named, it's not the name of the land because the name of the land is unknown. Who named it? The humans, we go and name everything. Yeah. So, but the first name that it was known with was Cacamensi. So I'm making prayers to Cacamensi. I made one for my daughter and one for my mother, asking for their protection, for her protection to Cacamensi, and acknowledging that she's there, like the Christian God. Printmaking is such a wide area. I was introduced with intaglio in Mexico for a couple of years and here in New York. And intaglio is completely different than lithography. I just have the understanding that this is a very serious process. And I don't know if by myself I would have the discipline to be a printmaker. I tried. Bob Blackburn, I don't know if you guys know who Bob Blackburn is, but he is a legend, and he created a printmaking workshop in New York and had it running for years. He was the kindest person in the world. And he tried to make of me, like a mentor, a printmaker. And I remember he gave me a printer with 2 colors, an intaglio, and then 1 roll. That's it, blue and yellow, of an artist, a famous artist who wanted 5 copies. And for 2 hours I failed, one after the other, and then I cried. And then he came and he was like, what happened, Kukuli? And I'm like, I cannot do this. Because 2 colors should be the simplest thing, right? It's an blue intaglio and then a yellow soft, medium roll. Who cannot do that? Me. I understood that was not my path.
I have a thought, because after speaking with you and working with you, I think that originally you did want to try incorporating intaglio or thought about doing intaglio, and we were talking about shaped plates, and I think that Kukuli was really interested in the physicality of embossment and some of the potential that intaglio holds over lithography. So I think that if she were to work with the Brodsky Center again, for example, I feel like that would be a direction that would make sense for your work, because it's much more...
It's dramatic.
It's dramatic, it's visceral, it's like metal plates, and I think it would have a presence that you would be interested in. Yeah.
I don't know, because I also, I have learned to appreciate the transparencies that lithograph gives you, and etching intaglio is more dramatic, but I think I like the fact that I had opportunity to use something that was not making it easier for me to deal with drama, which I'm a queen for. And that's one of the things that I have learned with this print, because to me, it's exactly speaking in the way that I wanted it to speak without an extra drama. And I find that very a learning experience, and maybe that is what is gonna go to my ceramic work. Yeah. Stay tuned.